Welcome in, everybody. Josh here from 8-Bit Goonies, and I want to tell you a story. Tonight's a story night, all right? So I want to tell you about how I kind of got into wheeling and dealing, right? Into not just cards, but the whole idea of trading this for that and upgrading what I have to get to that next level, right? So let's go back in time, way back. My wheeling and dealing days started when I was probably 8, 9 years old. I had two grandpas. I had three grandpas, actually. A step grandpa. Step grandpa was fantastic. He was into computers and very tech savvy, and even in the 80s, so he got me all my technology. But the other two grandpas were the wheelers and the dealers, right? So my mom's dad, he did gun shows. He was a gun dealer. He actually worked for Ma Bell, the phone company, right back in the day. He worked for there forever. But his main passion and his main side hustle was guns. So I'd go to the gun shows with him all the time, once a month, once every 2 months, whatever it was. And I didn't have any interest in guns. I dabbled. I was a little bit of a hunter back in the day. I grew up in Colorado, so of course I did. But my main interest at that time was sports cards and video games, and they sold both those at the gun shows. There's always a table or two with some nice cards. This would have been 1990, 1991. The hot set was the 1989 um, football score football. 1989 score football. It had the Troy Aikman, the Michael Irvin, like that Cowboys team. All the rookies from that. It was a great set. Really sought after cards. I um I I would go to the gun show with my grandpa, and I'd spend 12-hour days there. So from sun up to sunset, we'd go, and he would never buy me what I wanted. That was never in the cards. So in fact, he'd never even give me money. But what he'd do is he'd give me something. He'd give me a belt buckle or a pocket knife. A decent one, mind you, something worth $40, $50. But his whole gimmick was, you take this and go trade it for, try to get what you want. So, and oftentimes, you go to the table or the video game table for that matter, on a Nintendo game or whatever, because they'd sell systems there and stuff back in the day. And you'd go in and you'd ask, and of course, that guy say, no, I'm not interested. I don't want your belt buckle. So you'd have to wheel and deal. So I'd take the belt buckle to the guy with the, whatever, the old books, and I trade it for a comic book. And then I might be able to take that comic book and trade it for a card. Or I'd take the pocket knife and I go trade it for some shells. And so, like back in the day, they didn't. They'd sell you the ammo. They'd sell you anything. This was America back in the day. You could buy whatever you wanted at any age. It was crazy. Um, so yeah, you trade it for a box of shells and or whatever, a pair of boots, and then you take the boots and you go trade it for this and that, and the whole. It was all. Literally, that's what I did for the day. I'd watch the table. My grandpa would go grab lunch or the bathroom break, whatever. But for the most part, I was wheeling and dealing all day long at the tables, trying to get, a Michael Irvin rookie card or something. So, or a box of Pro Set 91, which is garbage. But that was really my introduction to wheeling and dealing, and I did this for years. So then it comes to my other grandpa, my dad's dad. Now, he wasn't into guns. Guns wasn't his thing. But he loved the pawn shops. He didn't buy or sell anything at the pawn shops. He was a bowler. He bowled like 4 nights a week. And all the pawn shop guys were in his league with him. So he loved just to go to the pawn shop. So I'd call him up. He's Papa. I'd call him Papa. Say, hey, Papa, the night before a school day. This would be a little bit later, 7th, 8th grade. So we're talking 92, 93, Super Nintendo era. Sega Genesis TurboGrafx 16. I had, well, we'll get to that. So I'd call him up. I'd say, "Hey, Papa, I want to go to do the pawn shops with you tomorrow." So he would love that. So literally once a week, probably he'd pick me up from school. He had a New Yorker, like a 1966 New Yorker, um, bench seats. He'd do the old hold my we no seat belts. Just put his arm around you if you're gonna stop fast or stop short or whatever. And yeah, he'd take us around, and we'd go to all the pawn shops. We had 6 or 7 that we'd go to, and we'd see John Simmons over here, and we'd see this guy Doug and Jim, and all those guys, Louie. Yeah. Anyway, and I'd go and I would take stuff with me to trade. So some days I'd be trading cards for video games. Sometimes it was video games for video games. Sometimes it was video games for cards. They dealt with all that stuff at the pawn shops back in the day. So I'd go, and it was crazy because I always had, people, kids back then, they'd get their system and that was their system. So Super Nintendo, that's all they ever had. Not me. I'd have a Super Nintendo one week. The next week, I might have a TurboGrafx 16 and a Genesis. Then I'd take those and I'd go swap them out. And these guys loved me and they loved Papa. So they never really ripped me off. I'd always get like fair market value, which was really unusual for those places. But if I wanted to swap a Nintendo for a Genesis, no problem. So literally, I just had new systems all the time, new games all the time. I never had many because I was always swapping and trading them out. I didn't need many. I remember trading a Super Nintendo for a box of, I want to say it was like 92 Stadium Club football. And then I think I traded another Super Nintendo for a box of 91 Upper Deck football, which, you look back on those sets, they're terrible, terrible sports car sets. But, this is something that you just don't get exposed to these days. And it was a wild ride. And looking back on it, it's like, holy shit, that's pretty crazy that a 9, 10-year-old kid, 13-year-old kid, I did it for years, was going to these gun shows and these pawn shops and mingling with not the best members of society by any means, but they were also the wheelers and dealers. And that's just how you learn how to do this stuff. And I never, my parents, they'd buy me a game very occasionally, but they weren't into video games. They had no interest in games. They didn't support video games, and that was fine because I didn't need them to. And Papa didn't like them, and my other grandpa didn't like them. So it was really just up to me to wheel and deal my way to whatever I wanted. And by the time I was, 12 or 13, I'd walk into the pawn shop with a backpack full of stuff. And of course, they needed a signature for everything. And Papa, he didn't care. He'd just sign off on it. Sure. Yep. I'll put my name on that. And they didn't care. And, but yeah, so I literally had everything back in the day. Never at one time, but I would just trade it out. And I have a Genesis one, like I said, a TurboGraf. I loved the TurboGrafx 16. I remember getting Keith Courage on that, um, and JJ and Jeff, and uh, I can remember going getting those John Simmons. I have jewelry from these guys still in my collection that I picked up like as part of a trade and stuff. It was just such a wild time, and I don't think that time will ever be around again. It was so special, that late '80s, early '90s time to be alive, and it really brought me into the world of wheeling and dealing and trading, and I love it so much now, and that's why I've carried on. I'm so into it, and I still trade constantly. I'm always looking to wheel and deal, um, and negotiate, and I'm not shy about it either. And that's I owe all of that to my 2 grandpas. My 3rd grandpa, like I said, he was fantastic as well. He was my mom's stepdad, and he was into computers. He was a technology guy. He was on the internet back in the '80s, that type of thing. He got me my Apple IIe when I was 6 years old or whatever. So I've been playing PC games since that time. I remember when I was whatever 7th grade, he got me Covert Action and King's Quest V, and those games changed my life on the PC. I realized PC gaming was where it was at, so I always had a PC. Legend of Kyrandia, those point and click adventures, all the Lucasfilm stuff. But yeah, no, I was thinking about that today and how I really, really enjoy the art of the deal, right? And where that comes from is growing up with it constantly in my life and never being given a game, but always having whatever game I wanted. If there was a new game coming out, have to wait a little while, but inevitably somebody's going to go pawn it at the pawn shop. And I'd just take my stuff in and we'd work out a deal and I'd walk home. Or they'd have, oh, there's that Scottie Pippen rookie card I've been chasing. I might, how about I give you the new Madden and we'll work out and a controller and you give me that and I'll take Keith Courage on the TurboGrafx 16. Come home for the weekend, come home for the night, and I'd have the games and be like, this is amazing, got my new system. And I did that for years. Uh, I would go, yeah, for years till I was probably 16. And then obviously I got my own truck and that kind of just stopped happening. But yeah, that was such an experience. I just wanted to share that with you guys. I want to do some more story time videos. I think that's fun. So yeah, gun shows and pawn shops. That's where I learned to wheel and deal. How about you? Anyway, have a good evening. Thanks for watching, guys.